live. Shout right into this fucker's ear. Webinar is now streaming live on Facebook. Okay, now I have to go here so I can see the stream. This is the way it goes, guys. I got to click into this Don Quixote, Adam Quiney. I got to click posts because I need to see my stream. There we go. We're going live. Oh, and there's a picture of me. I can see it. It's all happening. I click there. I can see if people join. I got to mute my computer so I don't create audio infinity. Okay, well, good morning, guys. It's Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm wearing my Team Airbuddy shirt to just to promote inclusion, really. I've already poured my tea, which I recognized as I was doing it, that may mean there's no way to determine for sure that it's not a cup of tepid urine, but that's fine. We're going to dive into it anyhow. Oh, you can always check by the look on my face. Definitely not urine. I'm going to click this haha emoji. There we go. I gave myself a haha. I like that. Thanks, Toku. Toku and I are secretly chatting. My special celebrity guest star. Let's see. What do I want to share with everyone by way of starting our call today? Well, one of the things that I'm present to this week is, first of all, Bay's back from Disney World. So she was away. Hey, Julie. There's something I want to thank you for, Julie. I'm going to do it in one sec. We're back. Bay was back from Disney World on Monday, and I missed her by far the most this trip than I ever have. And I attribute that to some extent to the work we're doing with our counselor. We work with our counselor about weekly, usually 3 times a month. And that work is challenging and at times infuriating, at times really validating, just like going through anything in life. And one of the things I've been getting present to, I might have shared this last week, is all the places where I'm not choosing into my relationship and taking those on. And that's not easy for a few reasons. It's not easy because the image I have of myself is of being like this man who's really dedicated, a really committed husband. I don't want to be that shithead. You know, I created a lot of how I learned to show up in relationship from the place of not being the shithead guy that doesn't care. And the irony there is that anytime we show up a certain way in life so as to not be something, the experience we end up in is not, I'm going to provide an example of this, but it's not what we're trying to create. It's, oh, now I am not, the experience I have is I'm not being a shitty man, which is still underneath that. You're still ultimately coming from that, like, shitty man is still ruling your life. So for example, if you're like, oh, my dad was always angry. I hate anger. I'm not going to be that. So then you create yourself as I'm always joyful. I'm never angry. The experience you're left in is not a life of joy. It's a life of not angry. You end up living your life from not angry, which if you really get down to the heart of it, is still a life dictated by anger. And so one, it's hard for me to see these places where I'm not choosing into my relationship. There's lots where I am. I could go down that path if I wanted, but I noticed that getting into that conversation, it has me get right. It has me get stuck and not really create anything new. It doesn't really open me up to some new possibility with my wife. It just has me be right that I'm already fine, which I am, but I want to create something beyond here. And so I've been noticing these places, letting myself be humbled by them, coming to terms with the fact that, like, hey, there's places, Adam, where you haven't been choosing into your relationship with your wife, and there's an impact to that. And so from coming to terms with that, from being willing to face that, from being willing to be humbled by that and kind of accept, like, yeah, you know, I'm doing my best and there's better. This is my best art currently, and I can do better art. That's created some space for me to start to create my wife in new ways, like, you know, to change my relationship to my wife. And so where that's left me this past week or so that she's been gone, I noticed I just really missed her. That's been much more present because I'm choosing into my relationship with her much more. So that's been kind of cool. I hope that's clear. It's a little, I know that these things can start to get a little like wordsmithy, like, oh, you're trying not to be angry, so you become joy, but then that leaves you not angry, and then you therefore are angry. So if that's confusing, let me know so I can. It's your feedback is helpful. Then I can actually try to get better at sharing this sort of stuff. That's the first thing that's been up for me this week. The other thing I'm really present to are the changing seasons and the kind of inward journey that winter represents. I'm going to say more for that in a sec. I just want to say good morning, Karen, Sachko, Nick, Julie. Julie, I want to thank you for dissing me, because Nathan and I were in Peru, and Julie sent this lovely voice message to Nathan recommending a bunch of places that we check out in Cusco. One of them called Monkey Coffee, which we did go to and thought was fantastic and gave us some of the best lattes we've had. But Julie didn't send it to me. What's the deal, Julie? You here watching my Facebook, but not sending me these BMs? Man, come on, girl. Anyhow, it was really cool. We really appreciated that. And despite the fact that it dropped my self-esteem down 5 points, I did really appreciate you making those recommendations for us. So last thing I'm going to say, you're all good, Julie. Last thing I'm going to say before I bring Toku on is I'll share here in the Pacific Northwest, fall comes suddenly. And the way it comes is with water. A lot of rain, and suddenly, instead of the clear blue sky that we get so much of during the summer, we have a blanket over top of us. Gray sky, overcast, quite gloomy, a little bit glary at times. And one of the things I'm committed to creating this year, let me first say, in the past, my relationship with the darker seasons, the more inward focused seasons like fall and winter, has not always been empowered. I found that I end up feeling kind of depressed, kind of less inspired. Oh man, winter's here. I can't wait until summer's back. And hey, Nuno. And something that's kind of neat to me is that I'm taking on this year is I want to have an empowered relationship with all of the seasons. I'd love to have the same kind of awesome relationship I have with winter that I do with summer. And so that's something I'm taking on in my life. And what I'm noticing as we head towards winter and go through fall, this season of change, is the desire in my own body to start to pull a little bit inwards, to start to nest a little bit more, to cuddle up with people. And rather than have that lead to an experience of loneliness, which is often what's happened in my life, I'm like, oh, we're all going inwards. I guess I'll nest by myself in my cold nest or my comfortable nest, but there's no one here to share it with. Really opening up and creating more community and people to do that with. So certainly with Bay, but also with friends, with community, with family. So I'm excited about the coming seasons. All right, well, that's enough about me. Before Toku comes on, I'll just say a little bit about him. I'm excited to play with Toku, nervous too. Toku's a man that I've partnered with in a lot of ways. We first met at an intensive, a Rich Littman intensive, when Rich Littman pulled him on stage and asked him to enroll the audience in some vision Toku had. And everyone in the audience had to put up their hand if they were enrolled or do a thumbs down or something if they weren't, which is just like the worst, like what is the worst way to practice something? Have 400 people giving you feedback right in the moment. So Toku and I have been fast friends ever since. Turn your video on, Toku. We can talk about that briefly, and then we'll dive into some coaching. And I'm gonna, what up, dude?
What's
I'm gonna
up?
put you on gallery mode. Hey, man.
Gallery me up, bro.
Oh, I can't hear you, which is weird though, because I can see. Oh, I know why I can't hear you, because I've got that. There we go. And then I mute my Facebook Live. Yes, I can. I can hear you so good.
That's so great. I love that. How's it going?
I like this shirt. What would you call this? Is this a Arizona shirt?
This is like my John Wineland homage shirt. This is like a shirt I imagine John. I always question whether or not it's like this is. I always want to like do this. This is how John would wear it. He would have it like this, and he'd have like a big tuft of like chest hair coming out. Actually, I'm gonna leave it on button. It's kind of nice. Yeah, it's sort of like my Northwestern like I go to Burning Man regional shirt.
It seems like the worst shirt you could possibly own or wear in Florida.
What's quite cool inside in the
I see. Excellent. Share your mug with everyone as a starting point.
All right. This is from Creative Mornings in St. Pete. So it says, "Hey, you're great" on this side. And then on this side, it says, "Don't fuck it up."
Don't fuck it up, people.
Don't fuck it up, yo.
Oh,
take your shit seriously. Don't fuck it up.
Grimby's sorry, Grimby, you can't do this. We're live on air. I got to do this, and I got to set the meditation.
Bam.
There we go. Sorry, Grim.
Shut him down.
Part of it. Morning, John. All right, cool. How was that experience for you that I just shared, where you had to enroll everyone, and like, what was your experience doing that?
It was super intense. It was a super intense experience. And then I'm like, how much shade do I want to throw here? So then Rich did his thing where he slowed me down and like asked me a story, and people were like super enrolled, which I don't actually know if they were actually enrolled, but I mean, he was trying to make a point about like, if you try to sell people, then that's like a bad thing. You need to share their story, which I think was a good point, but the experience was powerful. Mm-hmm. And I definitely remember it. I definitely remember that, like, a tendency I have, and this will come up in the project we're creating, I'm sure, a tendency I have to kind of blow people out, bring in like way too much energy. And which of course is like a fear that I'm always going to be too intense. And then of course I always I just blow people out. Like I bring things in and blow things out. And then I blow myself out, which is hardcore. So
fuck it. I'm coming anyhow.
Doing it.
Yeah. That experience with Rich is a good friend of both of ours. And I don't know if I'd say good. I'm going to say good. He's a good friend of both of ours. And yeah. One of the things about that moment is almost like it almost doesn't matter what happens after you try to enroll people. Like the fact that you're on stage doing that is forcing you into an experience. And then whatever ever happens afterwards is almost secondary to the fact that like, hey, you stood up on stage and tried like put yourself out there in front of 200 odd people. The next time you put yourself out there in front of 200 odd people, you're going to have a different experience doing it than the first time.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's dive in. So we started down this. Oh, but I got to say, one of the things I ask everyone that shows up, I send them a little form with like some really simple questions. And one of them is, what's the best gift you've ever given and the best gift you've ever gotten? And Toku, you put the lamest answer. It's a great answer, but I'm going to call you the lamest answer because you were like,
all right, come on. What
the best gift I've ever given was just being with someone when it was hard. I was expecting like, oh, I sent someone to France, or I took my parents on this beautiful, like I went and watched a movie with them, but instead it was just being with them when it was hard. Like, talk about doing the right answer.
I mean, I really looked into I take a little exception here when I looked at like, what is something that I've given someone that's really significant? Like just being with people in their heart is like, I don't know. It's just an intimate thing to do. So
it's a great answer. Right. Yeah,
I know, but it's not the typical answer. I wasn't sure what the context was, so I just tried to, I answered in my own Zen way.
I'll share the context before we dive in, which is one of the messages I'm getting from Spirit lately is big in the realm of gifting. And so I keep getting like these ideas show up in my head that are like, hey, you should take on giving more gifts. You should make this year in front of you about gifting, Adam. That's what you should put your attention on. And so I'm starting to ask all my clients, everyone that comes here to have this conversation with me, like, hey, what's the best gift you've given? What's the best gift you've gotten? To give me ideas, to have me thinking along those lines. So now I know what I'm going to give you for Christmas is like a really hard time. And then I'll just be with you while I'm giving you that hard time.
That context is really helpful. So there's two gifts that come to mind when I think about that then. So one is when I was in high school, I gave my friend a really nicely drawn picture of John Lennon. And it was just like, I think what was so, no.
Okay.
My picture of John Lennon would be like two circles in a circle. It was just a really like well-crafted gift. And it was in high school, and I think it was like a level above like classiness of the kind of gift most people get.
Yes.
So that's probably one of the best gifts I've ever given. And then, the other thing was I got my grandmother a shawl when I was in India, and she had it. And then when she died, she gave it to my mother. So it was sort of like a multi-generational gift, right? And so there was something about like being in a far off place and bringing something that's like really, really beautifully crafted and from someplace really special. One of the things I give my clients as gifts now is I give them, there's a Tibetan nuns project. I give them mala made by these Tibetan nuns. It has like that same energy. Like you can just feel the positive energy on it. So those are the things I love. I love to give as gifts.
I love that. Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, cool. Let's do some coaching together.
Let's do it. Let's not be any coaching. Let's do some. Let's do some.
Will come later. Yeah, we're gonna get you somewhere, and then you can have everything, all the experience you want in life.
I need to get somewhere. That's the problem. It's not good here, so I want to get someplace else.
So we started down this path because you were like, oh, I'm feeling different about projects, or I want to take on projects. Like, say a little bit about that and what we should sort of dive into here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really started as an investigation into my own coaching. A little bit is I've been in the conversation with myself about my own coaching. I've gone kind of both directions. I've been very facilitative, and I do very strategic work where I work with teams and we set KPIs, and I do really deep work like family work. And I was noticing with some of my clients that the deep inner work stuff was feeling really good. Like I could really create a lot of breakthrough there, a lot of traction. And I was noticed several of my clients at the time, less true now, but definitely at the time when this showed up for me, were really struggling to be in action. And I was really wondering, how do I tie those two things together? How do I tie a lot of the distinctions they're creating in the sort of conversational part of our coaching with the sort of more action-oriented part of our coaching? How do I tie the being and doing together so they reinforce each other? So much of the work I do like in the dojo is like very much about practice and being work together, but in one-on-one coaching, I would call it like, here are your practices, but it never quite felt fully tied together. And so I was just fascinated by the way you talked about how you created projects with your clients. And creating projects is something I do for myself, but I haven't had a lot of experience of other coaches doing it. And so I just got really curious, one, to experience how you did it. And then two, I've got a couple things I'm really up to this quarter, projects I want to take on. And I know how I reliably create projects and where it reliably leads. And I'm like, cool, I want to create this project in a new way. So I'll just stop talking and see what else you want to know.
Okay. So thanks for sharing all of that. And the last thing you said sort of is what's present for me, which is like, oh, I want to create projects in a new way.
Yeah.
So the two questions I have is like, what is that new way, and or why do you want to create projects in a new way?
So I was having a great conversation. Yeah, I was having a great conversation with our bookkeeper the other day, and she shared this concept of like, what is your business funded on? And so she asked me like, what has your business been funded on for a long time? And so, and I posted about this on my Facebook page, but I basically really got present to in the last year, like how much of a workaholic I had become. And so I think my business or our business was really funded a lot on my workaholism or my need to work hard or hustle.
Yeah.
A lot of which just came for ego and right. And so what I really want to fund or create my business on is on this concept they talk about in Shambhala called Drala, which is there's sort of three pieces. So there's energy beyond aggression. So energetic without being aggressive. And then practicing both the bravery of kindness and the bravery of living beyond deception.
Okay. Bravery of kindness and then bravery of living beyond deception. Kind of like, and I don't want to I'm not trying to paraphrase to put it in my words. I just want to make sure I'm getting what that means for you. Is that last one a little bit like integrity and authenticity, or is it something different than that?
I think I might distinguish them as like, there's a way in which I can create from the fear of lack. I mean, scarcity mindset would be sort of like a glib interpretation of it, but sort of like, oh, I need to be careful about what I'm giving, or like, I got to get mine, or I'm going to be graspy, or I got to make it happen. Right. Versus like, one, both holding that I can be kind and generous in what I give, but also that the universe is going to be kind to me in return. So kind of like faith or trust. And then the second part is the bravery beyond deception, which is sort of like, I think especially as a coach, I've sometimes gotten this idea of like, I need to present myself as like super successful and never struggling and, and instead to be like, oh, actually, like, can I fund my business on really being honest about where I'm at and what I've learned. Because in a way, like that's actually the thing that has me be super successful with the clients I'm currently working with. Like I'm working with a few coaches that are, kind of a little earlier on in their career, and I can see them starting to like get hooked into that like train of workaholism. And I'm able to be like, oh, like don't that, I know where that leads, right? Like, and helping them create the structures and the balance in their life and also the understanding so they don't, have to go a year and burn out and punch walls and like, lose their mind. It's like, oh, realize like, oh, like this actually isn't a good way. This isn't a way to create business. Like this isn't a way to create your life. And so, but to create from that place where I'm not deceiving. Well, I think, okay, that's one part. So not being deceptive outwardly. And then secondarily, not being deceptive with myself. And I think maybe that's even the bigger part because I'm more reliable to be authentic. I think there's a way in which I can like pretend that I'm doing more than I actually am, or pretend that I can commit to more things than I actually really can be relied on to fulfill. Right. And so there's a sort of like self-honesty that's required. I think in some ways, a new level of radical self-honesty that's required.
Got it. So how does all that relate to designing a project?
Well, so I mean, the project I want to work on is, I think I want to create is around creating one-on-one clients. Maybe not just that, but that's definitely like what I'm interested in. And partially it's because I am very reliable to do it, but I'm also very reliable to do it by kind of overworking. Right.
Right.
And so the way it relates to that is like, what I typically do when I build this project is I have like a big goal at the top. So it's a money number. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to tell people my number. So my number for last quarter was $45,000 I wanted to create in the quarter. And I hold that in a very particular way. It's not just like signing a client that like, so if I sign a client for a year, I don't count all that money in the quarter. I only count the money that counts for the sessions I give in that quarter.
That sounds nice and simple. Yeah,
nice and simple. I just like, it's like cash in the bank.
Yeah.
Partially is that I used to get very like, I signed a client for $30,000, but I'm like, well, actually, I'm not getting $30,000 now. I'm only getting a few months of that, right? So it's a way to actually have me be in integrity with like, what is the money that's actually coming in right now? Sure. Versus like, because then I would just spend that money before I got done with the client, right? So I'm trying to practice more integrity. So, so it's a number that I want to create by the end of the quarter. And then I have that broken down by like category of the way I would create that. So like one-on-one clients, strategic planning, half-day dojo, coaching dojo, and then I have a category for magic that I typically
Got it.
And so what I'm reliable to do is like put that number up there and be like, this is awesome. And then like not really like do that much right away or like do stuff, but not be super intentional about it. And then like get to like halfway and be like, oh, this is not going to happen. They're like, well, I need to do something, right? And then I act from, so distinction Mark Hunter gave me was I act from emergency rather than urgency. So instead of taking on the project and being like, this is my sacred work, and every day I'm sitting at the altar doing my bows, doing my zazen to the altar of this declaration, instead it's more like, I'm going to leave the dishes in the sink till Christina yells at me, which is not something that happens, by the way. It actually isn't, but I will leave dishes in the sink till
yells at you for dishes in the sink.
Yes, I'm going to leave the dishes in the sink till Adam yells at me. That's actually more accurate. Till Adam yells at me, and then I'll clean it up, right? Or I'm going to let everything get really gone. I'm going to wait forever to email people, and then I'll apologize to everybody. That's much more my style of approaching a project and coming from that emergency. So what I want to create differently is I want to create this from like, how do I start day one, or for me, it's day 4. Right? Day 4 with the energy of Drala that I can hold throughout. So it's never like, oh, I gotta, I'm never sprinting or cramming for the test.
Got it. Okay, cool.
That makes sense? I feel like I've offered you a really complicated thing. I hope that people are sticking with that.
Super helpful. So I'm going to talk to them, to like the people watching first.
Cool.
Maybe I'll talk to you that way. I don't know. But like, well, first of all, Toku, for you, I really appreciate how much of it's on loudspeaker. So like, this is such a gift when sometimes we can get swept up in it, because it's like, oh my God, there's so much, like a fire hose, but it's also like so much easier to work with it when it's all out on the table. It's all been barfed out on the table and we can pick through the barf rather than like when it's stuck in our innards and it's like, oh, I think I know the full picture, but I'm not really sure because I can't see it all. The second thing I'm present to, and this is kind of why I think a lot of coaches veer away from facilitative coaching, is because it sounds like you're actually pretty much already reliable to create. I would guess you've got a project design already made. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Toku is one of those people where, and anytime you work with someone who's got a bias for action or is a high performer or whatever label we want to put on them, they'll be like this, where it's like, set a huge goal. Got it. They'll set the goal. That's not going to be the breakthrough. So you could probably create you could hit that number a certain way, but it wouldn't give you the experience of life I'm guessing you're actually intending to create for yourself. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great. So first, for everyone watching, we want to make sure what most coaches do is they set a project like this and they're like, wow, my clients are creating results, and your clients will, the ones that are reliable to live in the land of results, and nothing will shift in their life. And you'll get to be like, I had a client create $1 million. And it's like, that's cool, except who cares, because the client was going to do that anyhow. And they're actually not changing the experience of their life, nor the lives of the people around them. There's no real transformation happening. And just because that's true, we don't want to throw out the bathwater, or no, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. So we want to honor projects. It's just that there's something missing in our project design so far. So what would be missing from the way it would predictably go for you, Toku?
Well, what's really interesting is what's very predictable is that I'll get close to, but rarely actually meet my goal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that just often shows up. Like I think my goal for Q2 was 35 and I created 30 in the quarter. And my goal for the last quarter was 45. It was less than that. So it was 30 and I created 25. This quarter, my goal was 45 and I created basically 31. That's pretty typical. Like there was a time when the dojo was actually sold out. First dojo we sold out. The second one we sold it out and then somebody quit. And so then it wasn't sold out. I was like, you mother, right? But that's often my experience. So what's missing is an experience of like blowing through the goal. That's something that's missing.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's the way I create the goals. Like I just like a little bit out of reach, or I just don't quite, maybe that's I'm waiting half the month to show up. So that's missing. Again, I think it would be this like, I almost want it to be boring. Like it's really exciting. The way I do it now, it's really exciting, but stressful. And being, somebody who's done recovery work, like I know that partially what I'm addicted to is the excitement. Part of like what drove my workaholism is it's really exciting to like have too much going on, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, like I want to appreciate the nobility of the simplicity of it, right? Or I want to appreciate how boring it is. There's something about it. I could be excited, but I don't necessarily want it to be exciting.
Right. Colin asked, do you love some? What's that?
Oh, no, I feel like I'm not answering your question, but that's okay.
No, you're doing great, man. That's
okay,
a great
cool.
answer. I was just going to say, Colin's asking, do you love something about cramming for the test? And I'll just say, well, we just heard part of it. And that's a great question, Colin. And I would actually invite you to broaden it if you were going to ask a question like that. Like, what do you get out of cramming for the test? Maybe it's not love. Often when we ask a question like that, it kind of drives people in a certain direction. And it might be that Toku doesn't love anything about it, but he gets some kind of payoff. And that's usually the way we experience these things, is we're like, I can't, but I must do it. I hate doing it, but I have to do it. So there's a payoff. And I think you're pointing in the right direction, but I just broadened that question. Was there something you were going to say, Toku?
I'm trying to not like join you as host, so I'm going to resist you. I'm like, oh, I've got a favorite question I use for that too. And I'm like, this is not a Dear Sensei. This is something else. I'm going to hold off.
Yeah, we'll leave some time at the end for us to nerd out that way too. Karen, You're the nerd. How dare you? Okay, so I hear you saying like, oh, I'd like to blow through the goal, which again sounds kind of like
pretty aggressive now that I think about it.
And also it sounds more like, but then I would have the result for sure. I would actually create the result. And so what I'm left wondering though is like, what's the vision? Why even create this number? What's magic about 45K? What is the experience of life you're hoping to create from like by going after this?
Yeah. Well, and my goals are different for this quarter, I should say. So I switched it up, and I created 3 goals: a bronze, silver, and a gold. So my bronze goal is 27K. My silver goal is 46.5, and my gold goal is 63K.
Okay.
And so the bottom one
why that distinction?
Why those 3?
Well, why have 3 different? What's the intention behind giving yourself a bronze medal?
Well, what's interesting is I've often noticed that I get to the end and I don't actually feel disempowered around not hitting my goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I just noticed that. I'm like, oh, I feel, I created $31,000 last quarter. Like, I actually feel great that I created that. But I'm noticing, I'm like, oh, I'm actually not giving myself the acknowledgement of ground taken when I do that, because I'm just creating for myself. Well, I haven't hit anything. Like, oh, I didn't actually hit the goal. And so I created for like, okay, what would it be like if I created goals that meant different things to me? So the first goal is like, that's just like, that'll give us like, we want to create a little bit of cushion in our business. And if I hit that goal, what we're already making, that'll create a little cushion. Like that's what our bookkeeper says. Like this, if you made this, it'd be great. You got cushion, it'd be great. You're going to start like, it's just cushion, right? You're just going to experience some cushion.
Okay.
And so that's my cushion goal. The next goal is that there's a coach that I want to work with, and I'm creating the money to work with that coach. So if I would have made that, that would be our cushion number plus the money I would need to hire that coach for 6 months.
Okay.
And the third number is that plus, plus some, and like, I'm sort of like, I know I'd create like a vacation. If I got to that place, I'm cool, I'm going to create a vacation for myself and Christina.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, or did I?
No, you're doing great. So what I'm still not present to is the experience you want to create for yourself. And so I kind of get like, if I do these things, then I could have a cushion, or then I could have a cushion plus a coach, or then I could have cushion plus coach plus vacation.
I mean, the experience I really want to have is that I want to have an experience of being in integrity with my word. I want to have an experience of saying, I'm going to do this, and then I make it happen. And I guess I want to do that without, I'm okay to experience breakdown, but without creating unnecessary drama.
So it's kind of like, it's not really a problem. Like, check my feet on this. I just want to make sure I'm hearing this right, but it sounds like it's not really a problem that you made the amount of money you made. That wasn't actually the project. Like, you're not broken up about that. You're not in dire straits. You're not.
I mean, how could I complain, right? We had 31K last quarter. It's amazing, right? So
there's many people watching that would be like, find out how we did that. That's what I want you to do, Adam. Like, do whatever the coaching thing is to make him tell us that. You can reach out to Toku for support around that if you'd like that too, because he has created it. And it sounds like it's more, there's an experience you're left with or left in where whatever the number, you're kind of left with, yeah, but when I say something, I'm not definitely, you're left a little bit disempowered every time. You're not totally creating knowing the power of your word.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, and I in the past, so it's interesting. In the past, I was out of integrity in a different way. So I would declare, I would create things, and I would blow through the goal, but it was just a massive cost to myself, right? Or a cost to my relationships, or cost to my integrity or my honesty. And so then I really did. I did the kind of.
Before you go further, what was that cost? Like, how was that cost borne out?
So. Emotional outbursts, numbing out. So I weighed 15 pounds more. I used to lose my temper. I a year ago, like 2 or 3 times, I like burnt out and like had to go to like a yoga studio for the weekend. Being just nasty with my partner, really mean to myself.
Mm.
So like, low self. Yeah, go ahead.
It sounds like relationships, well-being kind of cost you these things. But
yeah, well-being, emotional sobriety, I think is probably the biggest one.
Right. But you get to be in integrity, so to speak. Like, and I've
Sort
got a
of.
gauntleted ironclad.
It doesn't
fist
matter
kind
because
of.
I've achieved. I don't think it really was integrity either. I think it was very like, oh, my ego's satisfied. Right.
Right. Well, you kept your word to yourself to some extent.
Yeah.
Got it.
To some extent.
And then so now it sounds like you've kind of swung the pendulum, so to speak, out to the other side where you don't necessarily get to honor your word or keep your word or whatever, but what do you get from this side of things?
Oh, I lean and svelte, and my relationship is great, and I take care of myself.
That word, it's gross.
Svelte. Yes. So I get all of the personal. I mean, in a way, the last year for me is about creating personal integrity, right? I'm integrity with myself. When I say I'm going to work out 3 times a week, I work out 3 times a week. When I say I'm going to drink a green smoothie, I drink a green smoothie. When I say I'm going to get 7.5 hours of sleep, I'm going to get it. When I say I'm going to work my relationship, be responsible, I work my relationship, be responsible. So I didn't used to do any of that. So like, whatever, if I achieve outside goals, who cares if I'm a mess, right? And so, and now I'm like incredible personal integrity, like my body, my house, my emotional well-being, my relationship are just probably the highest level of integrity I've had in my entire life. And I noticed that this piece around what I would call business integrity or declaration in business is missing. And largely it's because, built my business and my projects around a fuel source of plutonium. And now I'm like, I'm not willing to be irradiated anymore. And so it's the engine sort of like, oh, no plutonium.
Right. So it sounds a little bit like you can either be in integrity with your business, so to speak, by like making sure that happens, but then it costs you your personal, or you can be in integrity in your personal, but then it costs you something in your business. Like there's no sort of, it's one side or the other, or maybe you scrape that pendulum into the middle and like hold it there, but then you're not fully expressed in either of those two poles.
Yeah, correct.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, I keep getting a sense that there is a third path here, right? That there's something outside of this, but I'm just like, every time I go there, it's like my mind just falls into the rut. Whenever I think about, okay, how would I create, $63,000 in the next 90 days, my mind goes, oh, I just got to do like 100 calls. I'm just like, well, I know where that leads, right? Me personally. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not willing to do that. And then I get a little bit, I get kind of stuck, and then I kind of just distract and disconnect from it. I mean, I'm again reliable to take action, but not action that actually has me meet my declaration.
Got it. Yeah. So, well, I'm actually hearing there's kind of 2 parts to this. It's not just, first of all, I'm talking to everyone else, the experience Toku's describing is exactly like when we're like a fish in water, and someone's like, hey, I noticed that in water, you never get to get the fruit that's on land. And the fish is like, oh, got it. The problem is that I'm swimming in water. Okay, I'll sit still in water. I'll not swim in the water. And it's like, yeah, well, you're actually doing the same. It's the same kind of thing. The fish like, well, fuck, what, how do I, so that's kind of the nature of when we get inside our little box, we start in one end or we go to the other corner and we're like, I can't seem to create what I'm really after. Okay, this is making a lot of sense. So what's predictable, like from this thing that we're drawing out? I get it. You're like, but what's the third path, motherfucker? And shit. I'm like, I don't know either.
Tell me how to do it, Adam. Yeah. Give me the answer.
So this is the cool thing about both you and I being coaches, and that our job is we don't actually necessarily have the answer. Thank goodness. It would feel better in the moment, and then we'd be bored of this job. What is predictable about the sort of projects you'll design from this place then?
What's predictable about the projects? So I'll design too many of them.
Okay.
So instead of going deep into like one, Like I'm just gonna, I mean, let's say I'm just gonna focus on conversations. I would do like conversations and try to do a speech and start a podcast. And like I would do 4 or 5 different things to try to achieve this. Because if one thing might work, then 5 will clearly work better, right? That's obvious.
Right. So that's kind of like the part where you, and I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. Is that the way you'll design a project or the way you'll approach fulfilling on the aims of the project, or both perhaps?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. Yeah. So I'm a little addicted to the new. So instead of doing like what I know is reliable, right? I'll be like, well, but this new thing is more exciting. This morning I was like, Adam and Bay and I should have a coach camp for coaches. And I'm like, what? That is, I mean, it's a great idea, but I'm like, I shouldn't do that. I'm super busy. They're super busy. I don't want to like get a campground. But that my mind was like, oh, that's so great. That's so exciting. That's it. That if we did that, we'd sign so many clients. Like, come on, dude. Right. That's not how I got my last 3 clients. Right. So one is sort of, I'll really seek novelty. I'll think I need to create the project as a totally new thing. Right? I need to completely redesign it from the ground up.
Yeah.
And then 2 is, instead of being intentional about like, okay, I'm going to just pick a few things and focus, I'll design the project so that it's, I mean, even the way I described it to you, like, oh, it's this number, but if that's the number that actually comes in that month, like I'm not even giving us, even my goal isn't simple, right? It's a complicated goal. So I tend to make it complicated.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, given that you've created 3 goals, it's great because what you're describing even kind of is showing up in the way you've created a project. It's like a trident instead of a spear. And so what'll happen with those 3 goals? Like, will you aim towards one while talking about going to, it almost seems like it sets you up to not
I'll probably aim towards the middle one and then make the small one. That's probably I'm more reliable to do that.
Got it. Right. Like aim for talk about the moon, aim for the satellite. This is a terrible metaphor. I'm screwing it all up. I don't know what
hit the space station. Aim for Mars. Aim for Mars and hit the moon.
Maybe hit the moon.
No. I want to go to Mars. Aim for Mars and hit the satellite.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there's a little bit of safety. Like, hey, I don't have to create that. Okay, I get that. So what would you really like? I get that there's results.
There's one more thing I want to share. Yeah, and it's something there's one more thing that Mark pointed out to me. So he said that he reflected to me that I tend to I don't make declarations I can't figure out. So if my brain can't wrap around how it's going to happen, I won't declare it. Right. Or I'll declare it, but I won't fulfill on it. Like I only really am actually reliable and have integrity to declare things that I can figure out. And so I think that comes to like the safety thing is like I think 46.5, like I think I could figure out how to do that. 63 in the way that I calculated in my head feels impossible. I'm like, I don't know how I would do that. Like I have no concept of how that would happen.
Yeah.
Right. So because it would mean like getting a huge sum of money for something that I actually delivered in the 4th quarter. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. I just don't know how that would happen. Or I know how it happened, but I have to do something completely new. And so that's the other thing that has me aim for the middle thing. It's like, oh, I can figure out how to get there. And so that means I'm reliable to declare to it. And I get extremely scared of like, what would it mean to actually declare something and fulfill on something that I couldn't figure out? My whole system is like, ah!
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like the fish being like, okay, you're telling me about this fruit that exists on land. I've got a declaration. I'm going to eat the fruit on land by having another creature bring it to me, and I'm going to stay here so I don't have to swim in water. And it's like, no, that's still inside the same water-shaped box. And so for everyone watching, when we're talking about declarations, which would be what by when, basically like I'm going to create this by this date, which forces our hand. If I say I'm going to go on a date with Richard Branson by January 1st, 2020, weird declaration, but I get to make it. I'm the one creating the declaration. Now I got to do some shit. I can't just sit back and if you ask me, hey, how's that project? How's that declaration going? I can't just say, oh, it's going good. I feel good about it. I've got actions I have to take. It forces my hand. It calls me into my life. And what most people will try to do is make declarations inside of the realm of what is predictable. and then do what they predictably know how to do in their life to achieve that result. So that's going back to where we first started. That's where a lot of high performers will make projects from. So like a declaration for you, Toku, I would imagine would be that's outside of what you know how to do would either be make 63K, or I'm guessing given what you've shared, it might be like make 46.5K and create this experience of peace, ease, well-being. Like I'm guessing that would also be outside of what is predictable. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes. Either
Okay.
one of those would be outside.
Got it. Okay, great. Just going to turn my fan on. It always gets a little toasty when I don't know the exact direction to go in. Anytime anyone who's watching, anytime you see me turn my fan on, it's like, uh-oh, don't have the right answer. This is where good coaching happens, by the way. A willingness to look stupid, and then actually sometimes even looking stupid. Okay, so the thing I'm still wondering is, what is the experience of life you want to create for yourself by virtue of taking this project on? So let me say one more piece. I'm not saying we won't take a look at results, but
totally.
if we set that aside just for now, like, why do any of this? What is the experience in your life that you would like to create via taking this on?
So at the highest level, like my purpose, and I think of purpose as I always think of purpose as a question rather than a statement. Mm-hmm. My ultimate purpose in life is to answer the question, how can I serve those walking the path of awakening in a deep and fundamental way? Mm-hmm. And then along that, I have these three missions. So one is to be an awakening being. One is to create deeply enlightened leaders that inspire others to awakening. And the third is to create coaches that create awakening in their clients. So those are like my three missions. Mm-hmm. For me, if I can learn to just fulfill on declarations that I make without burning myself out, then all of those projects, like they increase in possibility, right? So those are like the big projects I'm up to in my life. And I'm just really present to like one of the breakdowns in integrity that I have, if I'm going to create something, is this ability to declare and fulfill without drama. Did I not answer your question? I'm very concerned about not answering your questions today.
You're doing this so poorly. Joseph just said amazing session so far, but he's only referring to my part of the conversation.
Good. I'm glad. As I'm looking at this, I don't want to fuck it up. I should turn this mug around. All right. I'm going to tell you not to fuck it up. Yeah, all right. Totally. And mine says, hey, you're great. I'm going to remember that. All right. Don't fuck it up, Adam.
I'm just going to put a sticky over like the path of your mug so I don't have to see that. So, well, there's a couple things that, first of all, I love that as a mission, like a broad, almost like, what are you here for? You know, like it reminded me of the notion of the bodhisattva, which I believe, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but like of the being who has kind of worked through their karma and is staying to support others to do the same. Did I get that right?
Yes. Correct. Yes.
And what I was left wondering is like, but what does Toku want for Toku in this? So I got like, oh, if I took this on, then I could create this experience for others. And I do believe, like, it's one of the things that I love about you, and really, I rely on you. Like, I hold you as reliable for that you're willing to step beyond yourself to support others. And if that's the sole North Star we aim towards, it doesn't, the risk is that you create this opportunity for others to awaken, for others to be in integrity, to be all of that awesome stuff, and still not create the experience you want, which is okay. I just want to see, like, is there actually something you want for you? I guess it's the same flavor as before. So maybe I'm not explaining it with this like a clear experience. So it's like, I just want the experience of like declaring and fulfilling. Like that's, I want to be able to say like for example, at one point I was like, I'm going to run a marathon, and I ran a marathon. I declared and fulfilled on that. And that feels deeply satisfying for me. And when I was in the monastery, like we would always do these
we'd make a declaration of practice. We'd say, okay, I'm declaring I'm practicing at the monastery for 6 months. And then I would fulfill on that. And that's, there's something like, it's like a nobility or self-satisfaction, or just feeling like I guess a sort of sense of like trust, like I can trust myself to deliver on something without hurting myself.
Yeah,
right?
because I've heard you say that in the past you've declared and fulfilled.
Yeah.
But that did not create the experience you wanted. Otherwise, I'm guessing you'd still be doing it. Like there was something missing in that way of creating the project, achieving it, but then with a bunch of anger, well-being, workaholicism, the cost that you paid.
Yeah.
So what is that part that's missing? And I want to be clear, it may just be that I'm not getting it. So it's not necessarily that you're not getting this, right? Now that I see that mug, just stop drinking from your mug. It's really offensive. But what is missing? What was missing from the way it used to go that like you would want to create in, because I hear there's a breakthrough for you in doing declare and fulfill a different way.
Yeah.
What is that?
I guess I just want to feel like I'm not swimming upstream. Like I'm willing for it to be hard. And I'm willing to like, if for it to be uncomfortable, but there's a sense of like, there's a way in which I was like fighting the world and fighting myself. And I no longer want to create from fighting. I want to create from, love. Like, you know, it's a little bit of this, like I had the courage of before it was, we talked about this in Shambhala, the way we think of courage, just like overcoming the enemy. Like that's the way I practiced before. Rather, there's just like the courage of openness. And I think that there's a way in which I would contract around the goal and contract around the fulfillment. And I want to experience my body and my creation as soft and supple, but also reliable.
Got it. And so I think this is getting clear for me. You're doing great, by the way. I know that like we're kind of, my experience, anytime we're sort of trying to look outside that box, is it can be a little bit like, do I just suck and I'm a stupid idiot? That may not be your experience, but if there's even a hint of that, I want you to know you're doing awesome in this conversation. You're doing really great. So are we talking kind of like, I'm imagining that in setting a goal and achieving that goal, you would be creating that experience of declare and fulfill that you're looking for, of like knowing your word. Like that would kind of meet that part of what you're aiming for.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Correct.
And then it sounds, sorry, I go ahead and tell me your answer. I'm just going to talk over it anyhow. I already know that I'm right.
Good. I'm glad I'm not the only one that does it during coaching sessions. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that achieving whatever the declaration is, fulfilling on it would kind of, to some extent, it would imbue it with that part of what you're trying to hit. And then the other part I'm hearing is this experience of being soft and supple, of not being in a constant battle either with the world or with yourself as you fulfill on that declaration. Is that right?
I think so.
Did something show up for you there, or did that not quite hit it? Or
I don't know. There's a lot of words, but I just got lost in the words a little bit.
Cool. Want me to try another go, or do you want to try summarizing?
No, I think that you got it. Yeah. I feel you getting it. So I don't know. Yeah. I feel you getting it.
Well, what are you hearing?
Man, my mind just went blank. So interesting. I don't know why. This is really tender for me. I'm realizing like how really tender this is. Like it just, like I can even feel myself wanting to kind of contract around it. even now.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. I don't know. Can you ask me the question in a different way?
I can.
Or ask me something else.
Yeah. Well, where I feel called to check in with you is just like, tell me a little bit more about like, what is that contraction about? What is it there to protect you from?
I mean, I think that there's this always this like feeling that like I'm not actually going to fulfill on my dharma, and there's a real fear of that.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot of pressure. Like I got to figure this out. I really got to fulfill on this dharma. Like I've been given this. Like, I wasn't given like be a good waiter. It's like, oh yeah, go awaken all beings. Okay, cool. Thanks, universe. So yeah, there's a real fear that I won't fulfill on my dharma. And there's a real struggle about what that actually means for me. Like, what does it actually mean? Is there something in the realm of declaration, right? I notice myself being like, oh, I see people like, I should just do this render experiment, just whatever shows up fine. That doesn't quite feel right. And there's also this other, of course, very Buddhist, right? That doesn't quite feel right because that's too loose. And then there's also this like push and drive and achieve, and that's not quite right. I'm trying to find this middle way. And it feels very illusory. And so it's, and then I'm also really present to the pain of creating from that aggressive place and the damage it causes. But there's also this fear of like, well, what if I like have to do that? Like, what if that's the only way I can create? Because I have not experienced yet fulfilling from suppleness.
Mm-hmm. What have you experienced from suppleness? What have you been taught or discovered?
Well, my life is just way better. Like I just enjoy myself and others when I'm supple.
Okay, that sounds great. But
what's the but?
Well, I'm hearing you say like I've not experienced myself fulfilling on suppleness. And then when I asked you,
it's
like,
not actually true. Now that I'm like looking at that, I'm like, oh, that's not actually true. But there is still something missing there. That's like there's something missing.
Yeah. Well, over here, it sounds like you've learned through your life that you can either fulfill on your dharma, or you can have this experience of soft suppleness, but like you don't, like there's something missing. Like you don't fulfill on what you're here to do. And so then there's like this internal battle where it's like, I get to relax and be at peace, but fuck. And then you go over here and you're like, oh, I'm creating what I'm here to create, but fuck, kind of sucks. Why does I have to, and then back over here.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to acknowledge we're not going to resolve all of this, of course, in the amount of time we have. But I'm seeing some things. What I'm curious about is like, how would life be different for you if you didn't have to sort of be in this concern, fear, battle, not knowing whether or not you're going to fulfill on your dharma, or perhaps put even better, just almost being certain you won't fulfill on it? That was a lot of words. I can say it in less if you'd like.
No. Yeah. No, I'm okay. I mean, it would feel relieving. The pressure would sort of be off.
Mm-hmm. Who would you get to be then?
I don't know.
Awesome. We're in a place you've not been before. Stay there for a sec. So I want you to like be in that knowing and just like imagine like some places you might look are like, who would other people get to experience? I'm going to talk to these other weasels for a sec, but like, who would other people get to experience Toku as if he had that experience of relief and didn't have that pressure and knew that he was going to fulfill on his dharma? And who would you get to show up as? Who would you get to be without that stuff? For everyone else, first of all, when we hear I don't know, most of us use that as the end of an inquiry. So someone will be like, well, what about if this? And we're like, I don't know. Ask, you got any other questions? which is I don't know is not the end of the inquiry, it's the beginning. So once we get to I don't know, it's like, oh, cool, here's a place where we're outside of what is already known. We're actually starting to push beyond the water that we swim in as our fish. So we want to invite, hold space, and be a stand for the inquiry beginning, continuing, going deeper from I don't know. The second thing is that in creating a vision for a project and really getting clear on like a project that's going to create the breakthrough someone is here for, you're going to come up against exactly the resistance the client has in creating that project that is going to show up and sabotage them in fulfilling on it. Meaning, whatever is going to stop Toku from creating this vision in the world and the experience he wants and the results that he wants is also going to show up in us trying to create a project, because the project is there to move him towards actually creating that thing in the world. So of course it's showing up as we start to put it into reality. We're moving it closer to reality. So the same resistance is showing up. So if you ever have this experience where you're like, damn it, stupid client, why don't you just make the project? Because then you could create the thing. Or maybe you're not like me, but if you are, then know that actually this is perfect what's showing up. The client's resistance here is exactly the resistance that should be showing up. And the beauty is you're actually getting to do some of the work here before you have to walk with the client down the road. Toku, do you remember what we were looking at?
Yeah, you asked me what would the world get access to?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a fulfillment of my manifesto, and the first like kind of 2 lines of it coming up, which is sort of like the fire-breathing Buddha and the dragon of truth. Like there are these moments where I'm very like calm and relaxed and offering truth that that's really powerful and that actually go in way deeper because I'm so like relaxed. So I think that that's what people might get to experience. And I'm also really present to, I'll be able to be that person once I achieve X. Like that's very much what's in my mind.
And I notice, I want to hear that simpler. So I get the imagery, but I'm not clear. Like I'm craving you to share like, yeah, but who are you being as a fire breathing Buddha? Like, is that, I could imagine that might be angry, or like, what is the being of the fire breathing Buddha? And the other cool mythical creature that you would get to be.
I don't know why this is coming up, but like, and it's going to feel very personal. So like, there's times where you and I talk on the phone and you'll bring something to me that you're struggling with. And I could just feel like I was saying something to you that like you were really hearing and it was really what you needed to hear. But there was like no attachment for me about you hearing it or not. And there was just this real intimacy created. I mean, I think in some ways that's sort of maybe the pinnacle of my art, is creating intimacy.
Yeah, you actually feel softer in this moment as you were getting present to that.
Yeah.
So like relaxed, unattached, intimate. Any other ways of being that show up for you as you imagine yourself being those qualities?
Yeah, there's something from I don't know like any of the words, but I mean there's an element of like faith or surrender. It's almost it's sort of like step 1 or 2, like in 12 steps, like acknowledging that it's unmanageable and turning it over to God. I think that there's definitely an element of that.
It's a challenge for me. And I say that like that I find that so challenging. You know, I know what to do to reliably create results. And then once that's sort of handled, I'm like, yeah, but I got to create more results. And Spirit or God is like, I'm telling you, you don't. Like, yeah, but where's your business case, God? Show me my USP, fucker.
Didn't come into a set of Google slides. Your pitch deck was a
Sorry.
little short there. It was just a leaf floating on the wind. Come on.
Got it. So unattached, relaxed, intimacy, surrender, faith. So the practice I'm going to invite you to take on, like I'll ask you a few more questions, but ultimately the practice I'm going to invite you to take on is one where the measurable result is whatever you're going to say it is. So it might be 63K. It might be 46.5K. It might be 27K. Personally, if I was supporting you designing a project, which I am in this moment, I would invite you just to choose one so that you can be in the practice of making a declaration and fulfilling on it. But then the vision for this project is from like creating this and creating yourself and your experience of life as relaxed, unattached, intimate, surrendered, and in faith.
It's funny how immediately my mind goes, but how do I do that, Adam?
100%. Yeah.
So immediately where my brain goes, like, and it's so, oh man, being a coach is the worst when you're getting coached. Like, oh, come on, Doco, I know that's not the question to ask.
What is the question to ask?
I don't know, probably some bullshit like, who would I have to be being?
Well, I can do you a little better than that.
Yeah, do me a little better than that.
So the first thing I would say is like, before you even worry about the how, Bay says this, which I love, which is how before what turns what into but. Meaning if you try to figure out how to do something before you're clear on what you're trying to create, your vision becomes a but. It becomes a, but I can't do it. But here's all the reasons why not. And then nothing actually shifts. So for you, there'll be a time to come to the how. My invitation would be to get really clear, like on spend some time crafting this vision. So like, what is the experience of you in this project from a place of unattachment, intimacy, surrender, trust, and faith? Maybe write something, a paragraph for each of those words, like how you show up in that project.
Okay.
Maybe put yourself in the place of having created that result and then look back and then write about like, here's how surrender showed up in the creation of this. Here's the places where it was like really tough. And here's what I created. Here's what I did. Here's how my experience going through this occurred to me as I created this result.
I like that.
What's going to show up and get in the way of you fulfilling on this declaration and being these qualities, like fulfilling on this declaration from this vision? What's going to show up and get in the way of that?
Well, so I'll overcommitment. So I mean, we've actually sat down and created in our business. We're like going to stop some things we're doing to like create some space for something else.
Nice.
But what it would look like is overcommitment. So like allowing myself to die the death of 1,000 cuts.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
What is the thought or fear that overcommitment is intended to solve?
Well, what if this is the thing that has me hit the goal?
Meaning what I'm doing right now is the wrong thing?
Well, it's almost a little bit of this like, well, it's fear of uncertainty. Ultimately, that's what it is. And so, which I'm not sure I ever distinguished before, it's new territory. If I don't know how it's going to work out, I better just make lots of bets. I'm going to bet on every number on the roulette wheel. I'm going to bet on all of them. I'm going to bet on black and red at the same time.
Right. I'm going to make an assertion though, which is that a child faced with uncertainty doesn't have a story about how it'll go. So a young child, so they're probably not going to be inclined to like, I'm going to bet on everything. They might just be like, I'm going to bet on one thing, or a million different, like there's an array of choices that they would choose from, right? And yet with you, there is a lean in a certain direction, to which I am asserting for you, uncertainty has a particular flavor of fear. So, and what I want to do is distinguish that flavor, because the closer we can get in on it, the more power you have in the moment over it, and the more we can work with it.
I mean, the thing that popped into my head immediately was the fear of being left out.
Okay. What else pops in?
Fear of failure, fear of being wrong. Really don't like being wrong. Really like being right. Oh man.
Same.
The best.
Right. Got it. So like some of what is predictably, so great work. Thanks for getting like tighter. So for everyone watching, imagine like you went to someone and you said, hey, I'd like to support you. And they said, great, here's what I need. Get me a screwdriver. You can do that. And if you brought back a wedge screwdriver and what they really needed was a Phillips head screwdriver, they could probably use the wedge screwdriver to turn it, but it's just not going to be as powerful a tool. And so anytime we're trying to distinguish fear and get tighter on it to get clearer on what that particular fear is, that's what we're really doing. The more we can sort of distinguish what is the actual thing we're looking at, the more power we have to bear on it, the more we can work with it. Like that screwdriver metaphor? I like that. I just came up with that.
I did.
That's cool.
Never heard it called a wedge screwdriver before. It's a new. That must be Canadian.
What is it?
It's just a standard screwdriver. Standard
screwdriver. Huh. I've never heard that. Okay. Please don't drink from your mug. So left out, chosen wrong. How dare you, sir?
Here you go.
Great. So I think probably the last sort of thing, but like in the face of feeling left out, I've chosen wrong. It sounds like one of the things you've learned to do is like flathead. Michelle, thank you. It's a flathead screwdriver.
Flathead. Thank you. It is a flathead.
I'm such a flathead.
That's what it's much more accurately called. Thank you. Yes. Flathead.
From the fear of I've been left out or I've chosen wrong, it would make sense then you'd reach for overcommitment. Yeah. I'll say yes to more things, that I'm not going to be left out. I'm not going to have chosen wrong because I've chosen 15 things. It's hard to be wrong about 15 things until there's a 16th thing you might not have chosen. And so your overcommitment from that place makes total sense. What will there be to practice in the face of that? So when that fear shows up, what is there to practice?
Not overcommit. That's probably not it. The word that comes to mind is precision, and that terrifies me. There's this game, really great iPad game called Black, where you like you make a gesture of a line, and then the gesture repeats, and you have to hit the blue dots and not hit the black ones. I mean, I know that you love me. I explained the whole video game. That was great for everyone. So Christina, when she plays this game, she'll like think about the line. She'll draw one line. And she'll and then it just bounces and hits it. And I'm like, I'm going to do like a squiggle that does this and then comes back around, because like probably one of the squiggles will hit the right dots. That's like classically how I do things. And I have of myself that I don't have precision. And so because I'm imprecise, because I'm just sort of this blunt object in the universe, I have to just wave myself wildly, because there's no way. Like I'm not going to, sniper bullet somebody. I'm going to bludgeon them to death.
Love this imagery. Okay, so I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to talk to you, and then we're going to wind down and take any questions and speak to where we went. So The hardest part I find in coaching is often leaving people where they are. Like Toku probably feels it, and I can definitely feel like we could keep going for another 4 hours and like build this out. And there's times when for a client, I'll go and spend the day with them. Toku, I think you probably do this too, and like really go top to bottom and scour through what's showing up. And we work with the time we have. That's part of how we model for our clients integrity in time and integrity in our own world. So this is the place where we have to kind of wrap things up and give Toku some practices to take on in his own life so we can see like, hey, how did it go? And in order to allow and be the clearing for that, we have to be willing for him to go and do it wrong. Not just Toku, but everyone. Like that's what we kind of do is we're like, okay, got it. I think I've got it. We go and we come back and it's like, nope, totally just did the exact went right back in that water. And that's an integral, essential part of the process. So really important that we be willing to let people learn. You could say poorly, but the truth is that that's just what learning is. We have to be willing to let a child fall over if they're going to learn how to walk. And for anything new outside of our existing knowledge way of existing in the world, it's like walking. We're going to fall a whole bunch. Toku, here's my assertion, is that in creating this project where you declare on this awesome result, and you in doing so fulfill on that vision, like you actually get to be and create an experience of being unattached and intimate and surrendering and trusting. The gates you're going to have to walk through are a fear of being wrong and possibly even just being wrong, missing out, and possibly like, at least in the short term, not fulfilling on your dharma. And from those places, of course, you would overcommit and say yes to more because you're a man with like a massive mission. You and I both know that about you. And I think everyone here can see. And so for now, the only other practice I would offer you is don't worry so much about overcommitment. Just notice when that fear is showing up and practice being with it. And really like for bonus points, if you're able to create enough space to ask the question, you might just ask yourself like, hey, what would create more intimacy in this moment? What would practicing faith look like in this moment? I'm so glad I get to give you these practices because I'm just avoiding them everywhere in my life. So you figure this out and then come back and tell me.
I will. I'll give you the teaching.
Anything else you see that you might practice or take on coming out of this?
I love this idea of I definitely want to take on this idea of creating the vision and then walking it backwards. That feels really different. So those are both pieces I want to take on. The thing that it kind of moves me, so I know there's something here, is something about, as part of creating this, sharing myself with the world in more intimacy and really intending to speak with intimacy. I think I have a lot of the content I create, which I think is great content because I'm fucking brilliant.
Agreed.
Thank you. I think that there's a way in which I've been strategic, but I'm not sure if I've been intimate. And especially when I think about the project of creating one-on-one clients, because creating the dojo, creating a group is something different, right? I'm really aligning those people with the mission or the work that I'm offering. What I want to create in my one-on-one work is an incredible sense of intimacy. And so I feel real called for what would it be like if I created content or writing or invitation from a place of incredible intimacy. That really resonates with me.
Yeah, I felt you in that.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to come back here in a week, and I ask everyone this, and put a comment sharing like, here's the vision I created?
Yeah.
You up for that?
Absolutely. Totally.
And this is a reminder, Tim, if you're watching this, you made a commitment to come back last week and share something in the comments of our last video. So Tim, please go and post that. Awesome. It feels like a good place for us to wind down. That feel good to you?
Yeah, feels great.
Cool. So then before we go to questions or just debriefing, I just want to say, Toku, I want to really acknowledge you for thanks for this is going to be an acknowledgement of you, but I'm going to start here. I remember when I first came to my current coach, Rachel, one of the things I said to her is, I feel like a messiah. Like, I feel like I'm putting myself out there. I'm doing everything I can for everyone. And like, when do I get to eat? When do I get the gift or whatever? Which was my own creation. There's no truth of that out there in the world. That's how I was creating myself as. In that choice I was making, there was like a real desire to serve the world. And I really get that about you too, Toku. Like, I really experience you as a bodhisattva, a man really committed to, I want to support people to get the gift of this life. And I know that you, like I, can see how much it costs people not to be awoken. And I know you also feel the pain, or maybe the better word for it is like just the heartbreak, when the work to do for someone is to let them be on their journey, and to trust that, even when it's like, but I can wake them up right here. Like, I've got this rock in my hand, hit them in the head. So, and then I also know sometimes that's what we ended up doing to ourselves. And so I really honor you for your nobility, your brilliance as well. And thanks for being so reliable to create all the results that you're creating. And then I really want to thank you as a fellow traveler in so much of our work together, and especially in deepening a relationship with spirit, because it's just, man, if it was just following business models, there's so many books you can point to and be like, well, I'm doing the right thing, so the problem's these people. But like, spirit didn't. We wrote books about spirit. Spirit didn't write books for us. There is no one book. There's no place we can find that. So I acknowledge you for the faith and the surrender and the journey that you're on and what you're up to. Thanks, man.
Thank you, buddy.
There's a question that Mara gave us, but first I want to, what is there for you to share, if anything, in this moment that you haven't already shared? Anything you want to talk about or put into the space that you noticed that you didn't notice?
About the coaching?
Sure. Yeah. Where we went, projects.
Yeah. I mean, I thought we'd be more structural. I guess I'm not surprised we weren't that structural, but I thought we'd be more structural. I loved the importance you placed on the vision. I think that may be something that I have been stepping over with my clients. So I love this. I loved how you sort of emphasized the vision, and that was really powerful. What else did I notice? I mean, in some ways, I always feel like as a coach, I'm like, man, I make everything so complicated in how I answer. Like, there's a desire to be precise, right? And it is a way of sometimes why I love working with CEOs, because they're like, well, this guy's just a jerk. And I'm like, okay, well, that's easy. I can work with that. And for me, it's never I'm like, oh, well, they're just a jerk. I'm like, well, they occur to me as having a kind of irritation. And so there's a way in which I can almost become annoyed with my own coachiness. So I was just present to that. And I also I'm also just present to how beautiful that is, right? There is this sort of very specialized way of speaking that you and I share, and it's nice to use that level of precision, right? Where we're not just creating with big magnetic letters. We're writing with a beautiful, a beautiful pen. And so I appreciated both sides of that.
My coach once stopped me. I've done this a million times hence, but she stopped me and was like, Adam, I really appreciate you sort of trying to coach yourself, being a few steps ahead and really trying to do the work. And just notice that's getting in the way of you having the experience of being a client. You actually don't have to have this figured out. You don't even have to be responsible in this conversation. It's okay for you to be victim, angry, all the stuff that you're holding yourself not being okay with. You could practice here being okay with those and allowing them to be in the space, which might give you a new experience. And I was like, And so at first I felt relief, and then I was struck by how hard it was. That's just challenging, And so I'm with you. It's funny how one of the things I noticed, you've probably noticed this too, is someone becomes a coach. It's we could draw the timeline, become coach, maybe get some training. 1 year, 6 months to a year later, I've decided that I'm going to coach coaches. That's that far. And I guess if I was to offer a message, it's well, that is the hardest place to do the work. It seems easy because coaches know that they need coaches and blah, 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 blah. coaches are sneaky and we're sophisticated with our ego because we have our ego takes the language of transformation and coaching and uses it to do its own nefarious work. So I get that. And the other thing I want to share, you were talking about like projects and structure, and this was an edgy conversation for me. When you wrote me and was like, oh, coach me around creating a project, I was like, oh, you fucker. Because I've had a lot of resistance to projects in my own life for a long while because I think like you, I'm generally reliable to create a result a certain way. And I notice I and my clients can be resistant to the structure of a project. And we're like, what's even the point? Because I'm going to make it happen anyhow. And it was about a year ago that I realized like, I brought it to my coach and said, I notice I'm not empowering projects in my own life. And I don't think my clients are either because I'm not really the clearing for that to show up. And so I did a lot of work there. And then just recently started to kind of be in the conversation with myself, like, hey, there's clients I have that should really be supported inside the structure of a project. And then you wrote right as I was having that thought. So like, thanks universe. There we are. Yeah. Let's talk about, I'm going to read Mara's question here. Yeah. So she says, how do you break through a plateau? You're doing well, accomplishing stuff. There's more, but energy is waning. Annoying dreariness is showing up. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet, soft lull. What if everything is fine, capitals? Nothing wrong, just dull. Is it time for a reset? So many of us love the perpetual spring in which it's time to create. Winter is natural and necessary. How does one know it's time to rest or time to dig deeper and crash through a plateau? Any thoughts over there with you, Toku?
I mean, it's like the most annoying thing for a coach to ever say, but like it totally depends upon the context of the plateau, right? Like, and who it shows up for. I think for me, for example, like if I were to hit a plateau where I'm actually creating really reliably, the thing for me to do would actually be to just stay in that plateau and empower what was happening, right? I mean, that's one of the last things like Han said to me that really resonated. He's like, oh, the work from here is like mundanity. Like your job is to appreciate the mundanity of life. And I'm like, oh, screw you. I don't want that. But it is like, there's in this last year of my life, there's been something about like, just like green smoothie every day and work out 3 times a week that like, I am seeing the glory of that. But it's in some ways it's very boring. And every time I try to push outside of that, especially my health, things get wacky. So I think it depends. I think some people go to the plateau and hide. It's a place of cynicism and resignation. And some people go into the hiding place of like the new. So it would just depend on like, what is that person's pattern around the plateau? And I think the other part is like, it's never about changing. It's almost never about changing what you're doing. It's okay, this is showing up. How do I shift how I'm relating to what's showing up or shift what I'm doing now? How do I empower what I'm doing now? And then from empowering what's happening now, what am I going to create next? Versus treating it like a problem where like, I shouldn't be this way. And so I'm going to make it different. Like, no. What's showing up is exactly the right thing. I'm going to empower what I'm doing now and then choose what's next.
Good answer. Let's see. I'm going to answer. I'm with you. I'm like Toku and I are very in agreement about this part. Like it always depends on the context. For me, let's say there's 2 ways I'm going to talk about plateaus showing up. One is that moment where you take on something new, you're growing, or you overcome a plateau, we'll say, and you have this moment of growth, and then it plateaus out while you're learning, training, developing, and you sort of flatten out, and then suddenly everything gets integrated, and then you have the next moment of growth. For me, those kinds of plateaus are challenging because I like novelty. Like my addict is like, this is boring and mundane and I want to do the new sexy thing. And that's hard. Toku, what's your time like? Do you have to run off?
No, I'm okay. I have a call at the top of the hour. So.
Okay, great. We'll finish in about 15, I think.
Yeah.
So for me, I think a little bit like Toku was saying, like how do I want to be with this plateau? What is my relationship to this plateau? A lot of people, they have the relationship with it. They're like, oh, things are failing. if you go back and watch the call with Tim last week, that was kind of Tim's relationship with it. Things start out, they're great. Then he hits the plateau and he's like, oh no, I'm failing. I'm not doing enough. And then he overcommits. He takes on more and more. He can't, and then so on and so forth. There's other people, and Mara, my hunch is that this would be where you would fall, where things are exactly that. They're fine, and we've kind of got life handled. And that will lead to a flattening. Life is ultimately about, like, a life of expansion is about leaning into the fear, which is terrifying, and then having the ups and downs that creates. And so for that flavor of plateau, it's really a function of kind of getting life managed and handled, and then finding like, wow, there's not that much new that's coming in. I'm kind of bored here. I'm fine. So that's like the life that's 8 out of 10 across the board. My people are very reliable to create this, where we're like, it's all fine and good, but it's kind of boring. And then we turn to things like drinking wine or getting stoned or having affairs or whatever it is to try to create the excitement of life outside of the safety, the boring, mundane safety we've created. Those are two kind of ways. Anything else that you want to talk about, Toku? I know that's like a big, broad question, but I'm just going to throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually feel, I'm kind of curious about what is like the relationship of intimacy and coaching. I often find for me, like with my best clients or the clients where things feel the easiest, that intimacy is very natural. And then often it's those moments where I do want to hit my clients in the head with a rock, where I actually really struggle to be intimate with them. Because I'm just sort of like, well, yeah, you keep talking about this thing, but you're actually not taking any action, you're not doing anything different, you're not taking on any of the practices. So of course you're getting the same result, idiot. But I notice myself like pushing away from them. And so it is a struggle for me to like, it's easy to stay intimate with the clients that are in the hunt. I really struggle with staying intimate with clients that are like in the mess. And so that's just a place for me to kind of look. And I'm kind of curious about how you practice with that.
I have the same thing you do. So like doing the same thing over and over, expecting like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? And my relationship to myself in that place is like, why are you doing the same thing, dummy? Like there's not a lot of love for me in those moments. And so consequently, I work my ego, I guess you could say, works hard to not have to confront those moments. So some of the ways it does that is be in denial when I'm there, keep trying to do new things so that I never keep doing the same thing. Know the answer, read the book, research heavily so that I make sure I don't find, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm present to is that's been the case for a few clients lately, where they've been doing the same thing and it's not working. And eventually they come and they either say, I don't think the coaching's working, or they say, I feel like you hate me, or something like that. And then that's usually the point where the breakthrough can happen. Like at that point where we're like, fuck it, I keep doing this thing and it's not working. And the mirror keeps showing me doing the thing, and it's also showing that it's not working. Help. And then it's like, well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna try differently? Like my mirror doesn't tell me to put on a different shirt. It just says, here's how that shirt looks with those pants. That's hard. Like, yeah, it's hard not to fix people. I don't know about you, but I can feel it. You know, I want to give them the answer. I want to give them a solution or something like that. And there's times when I do, but there's a lot of times when, especially my people who, like me, were so geared to try to find the answer out there. It's like, no, I just got to let you be here in the struggle and love the fuck out of you as you struggle and make me want to kick you. God damn it.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing is for me, and to me, is that solution is really just kind of a break of intimacy, right? Because like if I give them the solution, then I don't actually have to be with them in the mess.
Yeah,
and it really takes a really incredible stand for possibility in the face of humanity, right? I think the other thing I'm present to is like what is it? All upsetness is caused by unrealistic expectation. That's something that I've been doing a lot of work with my clients is like, why am I expecting them not to be human and not pull the same crap? I pull all the same crap over and over again all the time, right? Tell me how many times in the last like year Honda's like, you're doing that thing. And I'm like, shut up. Yeah. So like one, just having the realistic expectation of allowing humanity. I think that coaches can get this idea that we're not supposed to allow humanity in our clients. Right, we're supposed to be a stand for their greatness, and that means then they translate that into not allowing humanity. And certainly, I did that a lot. And so there's a place in like, okay, how do I allow their humanity, and then be a stand for their possibility, without really expecting them to do anything, then show up how they are. And that's just like, it's torture, and it's like so powerful when you're able to pull it off and be in that practice.
Yeah, that's the. We could just do a live where we just talk about pitfalls in coaching. The one of the great ones is where you don't stand for someone's humanity, or you're not holding space for someone's humanity, is that one where coaches are like, and I fired them and it was super powerful. Like, yeah, I fired them. And it's like, no, you didn't. You did the exact same thing the rest of the world did. Like you either cowed to them being aggressive or you fired them when they're being aggressive. You did not create the intimacy to be with them in that. And we're not talking about abuse, but like, yeah, that I have a lot of admiration for people in this profession that are practicing being with people, because people are amazing, but they're also friggin' crazy.
Yeah,
I have a sample size of one, but that guy is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other side of that, which is really tricky, and again, we could do a whole live on this, is like there is also a boundary there, right? Because I think the other thing coaches can fall into is like, well, I'm just gonna accept their humanity and love them and love them and love them without really being a stand either, right? Yeah. And that's an edge I find that I'm just always practicing with. Like, okay, how do I stand and say like, hey, I actually have a boundary here, and it doesn't make sense for us to continue working together if this is how you're going to show up. Yeah. And at the same time, like, you're not doing anything wrong. I just like, hey, like this is what it looks like to ride this ride, and you are not showing up this tall. And so that's such a tricky place to work with people, and then also just to be complete on whatever reaction they have to that. Because a lot of times I've had that in place where I'm like, I really need to like stop working with this client, not because like I can't be with them. I was like, it doesn't feel like they're actually showing up committed. And I pointed that out to them and nothing changed. And so then I say, okay, well, hey, I'm going to stand for you actually to be committed. And, I stood for that, and you're just not showing up. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. And then immediately I go to like, well, what are they gonna think about me? And they're gonna think a coach quit on them. And I'm like, oh man. So there is also a place of boundaries where you actually declare this is what the line is. And then you have to have a conversation with people saying, hey, you haven't met the line. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we want to assert our boundaries, but then for the rest of the world to be like, oh, got it, thank you for asserting your boundaries, totally makes, like, that's not how it works. Like, if that's what stand required, that'd be easy. Why wouldn't we all be doing that? Oh, the problem was I just didn't say it out loud. No, the problem is you got to stand in that place. You got to be willing to stand for it and be with whatever shows up. Nathan, our friend Nathan says, it's so interesting that knowing what your dharma is can create pressure that pushes you further from your dharma. I like that. I've got this path, which creates pressure to be on that path, which then actually drives me away from the path. It's kind of beautiful too.
The ego grabs a hold of everything, right? And so there is an element of understanding that that's the case. The ego gets behind enlightenment, and then how do I relax around that? Yeah, which is hard, especially when you have a big dharma.
Yes, indeed. Not a big ego.
No, my ego's tiny.
Toku, where can people find you, and what should they know about what you're up to and what you're doing?
So you can check out samuraicoachingdojo.com. We're running like half-day dojos, a dojo in the spring. If you want to find out about that, we do this kind of intimate practice with coaches. I do one-on-one work at unexecutive.com. So if you want to find about that, that's where I am. Or just reach out to me on Facebook. Way to create intimacy, just reach out personally. And then, if you're a coach watching this, I guess my sort of closing dharma talk is just like, please don't just take all the things that Adam talked about, like really put them into practice. Because for me, like, I've learned so much in being with Adam, not because like he talks about project. I'm like, great, man, right? That's how to write a project. I mean, even before we had this call, like I took the one conversation we had in Victoria, Canada, and I've been putting it into practice with my clients. Okay, we're going to create projects, and I'm figuring out my own distinctions, because there's a difference between knowing and distinguishing. And so don't just know Adam's brilliance, distinguish it for yourself, because it's just so much more powerful that way.
That's cool. I love the way you said that. And you have a Facebook group called the Samurai Coaching Dojo as well, right?
We do as well. Yes, thank you.
So people can, then that's free. People can just go and just eat your food and soak in your brilliance.
Sit in my hot tub and, do all that stuff.
Toku, I love you. Thanks for being here, man. It's a treat. We get to talk later on this afternoon, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So it's not a goodbye for us, but for everyone else watching, goodbye. Thanks for being with us this Friday. We'll see you next week. That means I click